Anne Frank, middle of page 218. Friday, March 17th, 1944. My dearest darling, everything turned out to be all right. Pep just had a sore throat, not the flu, and Mr. Kruger got a medical certificate to excuse him from the work detail. The entire annex breathed a huge sigh of relief. Everything's fine here, except that Margot and I are rather tired of our parents. Don't get me wrong, I still love Father as much as ever, and Margot loves both Father and Mother. But when you're as old as we are, you want to make a few decisions for yourself. Get out from under their thumb. Whenever I go upstairs, they ask what I'm going to do. Then they won't let me salt my food. Mother asks me every evening at 8:15 if isn't time for me to change into my nightie, and they have to approve every book I read. I must admit, they're not at all strict about that and let me read nearly everything, but Margot and I are sick and tired of having to listen to their comments and questions all day long. There's something else that displeases me. I no longer feel like giving them kisses. Little kisses, morning, noon, and night. All those cute nicknames seem so affected, and Father's fondness for talking about farting and going to the bathroom is disgusting. In short, I'd like nothing better than to do without their company for a while, and they don't understand that. Not that Margot and I have ever said any of this to them. What would be the point? They wouldn't understand anyway. Margot said last night, what really bothers me is that if you happen to put your head in your hands and sigh once or twice, they immediately ask whether you have a headache or don't feel well. For both of us, it's been quite a blow to suddenly realize that very little remains of the close and harmonious family we used to be at home. This is mostly because everything's out of kilter here. By that I mean that we're treated like children when it comes to external matters, while inwardly we're much older than other girls our age. Even though I'm only 14, I know what I want. I know who's right and who's wrong. I have my own opinions, ideas, and principles. And though it may sound odd coming from a teenager, I feel I'm more of a person than a child. I feel I'm completely independent of others. I know I'm better at debating or carrying on a discussion than Mother. I know I'm more objective. I don't exaggerate as much. I'm much tidier and better with my hands, and because of that I feel, this may make you laugh, that I'm superior to her in many ways. To love someone, I have to admire and respect the person, but I feel neither respect nor admiration for Mother. Everything would be all right if only I had Peter, since I admire him in many ways. He's so decent and clever. Yours, Anne and Frank. Saturday, March 18th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, I've told you more about myself and my feelings than I've ever told living soul. So why shouldn't that include sex? Parents and people in general are very peculiar when it comes to sex. Instead of telling their sons and daughters everything at the age of 12, they send the children out of the room the moment the subject arises and leave them to find out everything on their own. Later on, when parents notice that their children have somehow come by their information, they assume they know more or less than they actually do. So why don't they try to make amends by asking them what's what? A major stumbling block for the adults, though, in my opinion, it's more than a pebble, is that they're afraid their children will no longer look upon marriage as sacred and pure once they realize that, in most cases, this purity is a lot of nonsense. As far as I'm concerned, it's not wrong for a man to bring a little experience to a marriage. After all, it has nothing to do with marriage itself, does it? Soon after I turned 11, they told me about menstruation, but even then I had no idea where the blood came from or what it was for. When I was 12 and a half, I learned more from Jacques, who wasn't as ignorant as I was. My own intuition told me that a man and a woman do when they're together. It seemed like a crazy idea at first, but when Jacques confirmed it, I was proud of myself for having figured it out. It was also Jacques who told me that children didn't come out of their mother's tummies. As she put it, where the ingredients go in is where the finished product comes out. Jacques and I found out about the hymen and quite a few other details from a book on sex education. I also knew that you could keep from having children, but how that worked inside your body remained a mystery. When I came here, Father told me about prostitutes, etc. But all in all, there are still unanswered questions. If mothers don't tell their children everything, they hear it in bits and pieces, and they can't be right. Even though it's Saturday, I'm not bored. That's because I've been up in the attic with Peter. I sat there dreaming with my eyes closed, and it was wonderful. Yours, Anne and Frank. Sunday, March 19th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, yesterday was a very important day for me. After lunch, everything was as usual. At 5, I put on the potatoes, and Mother gave me some blood sausages to take to Peter. I didn't want to at first, but I finally went. He wouldn't accept the sausage, and I had the dreadful feeling it was still because of the argument we'd had about distrust. Suddenly I couldn't bear it a moment longer, and my eyes filled with tears. Without another word, I returned the platter to Mother and went to the bathroom to have a good cry. At first I decided to talk things out with Peter. Before dinner, the 4 of us were helping him with a crossword puzzle, so I couldn't say anything. But as we were sitting down to eat, I whispered to him, "Are you going to practice your shorthand tonight, Peter?" "No," was his reply. "I'd like to talk to you later on." He agreed. After the dishes were done, I went to his room and asked if he'd refused the sausage because of our last quarrel. Luckily, that wasn't the reason. He just thought it was bad manners to seem so eager. It had been very hot downstairs, and my face was as red as a lobster. So after taking down some water for Margot, I went back up to get a little fresh air. For the sake of appearances, I first went and stood beside the Van Dan's window before going to Peter's room. He was standing on the left side of the open window, so I went over to the right side. It's much easier to talk next to an open window in semi-darkness than in broad daylight, and I think Peter felt the same way. We told each other so much, so very much, that I can't repeat it all, but it felt good. It was the most powerful evening I've ever had in the annex. I'll give you a brief description of the various subjects we touched on. First, we talked about the quarrels and how I see them in a very different light these days, and then about how we become alienated from our parents. I told Peter about Mother and Father and Margot and myself. At one point, he asked, "You always give each other a good-night kiss, don't you?" "One, dozens of them." "You don't, do you?" "No, I've never really kissed anyone." "Not even on your birthday?" "Yeah, on my birthday I have." We talked about how neither of us really trusts our parents and how his parents love each other a great deal, and he'd wish he'd confide in them, but that he doesn't want to. How I cry my heart out in bed, and he goes up to the loft and swears. How Margot and I have only recently gotten to know each other, and yet still tell each other very little since we're always together. We talked about every imaginable thing, about trust, feelings, and ourselves, our Kitty. Oh, Kitty, he was just as I thought he would be. Then we talked about the year 1942 and how different we were back then. We don't even recognize ourselves from that period. How we couldn't stand each other at first. He thought I was a noisy pest, and I quickly concluded that he was nothing special. I didn't understand why he didn't flirt with me, but now I'm glad. He also mentioned how he often used to retreat to his room. I said that my noise and exuberance and his silence were two sides of the same coin, and that I also like peace and quiet, but don't have anything for myself alone except my diary, and that everyone would rather see the back of me, starting with Mr. Dussel, and that I don't always want to sit with my parents. We discussed how glad he is that my parents have children, and how glad I am that he's here, how I now understand his need to withdraw in his relationship to his parents, and how much I'd like to help him when they argue. "But you're always a help to me," he said. "How?" I asked, greatly surprised. "By being cheerful." That was the nicest thing he had said all evening. He also told me that he didn't mind my coming to his room the way he used to. In fact, he liked it. I also told him that all of Father's and Mother's pet names were meaningless, that a kiss here and there didn't automatically lead to trust. We also talked about doing things on your own way, the diary, loneliness, the difference between everyone's inner and outer selves, my masks, etc. It was wonderful. He must have come to love me as a friend, and for the time being, that's enough. I'm so grateful and happy. I can't find the words. I must apologize, Kitty, since my style is not up to my usual standard today. I've just written whatever came into my head. I have the feeling that Peter and I share a secret. Whenever he looks at me with those eyes, with that smile and that wink, it's as if a light goes on inside of me. I hope things will stay like this, and that we'll have many, many more happy hours together. Your grateful and happy Anne. Monday, March 20th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, this morning Peter asked me if I'd come again one evening. He swore I wouldn't be disturbing him, and said that where there was room for one, there was room for two. I said I couldn't see him every evening, since my parents didn't think it was a good idea, but he thought I shouldn't let that bother me, so I told him I'd like to come some Saturday evening, and also asked him if he'd let me know when you could see the moon. Sure, he said. Maybe we can go downstairs and look at the moon from there. I agreed. I'm not really so scared of burglars. In the meantime, a shadow has fallen on my happiness. For a long time, I've had the feeling that Margot likes Peter. Just how much I don't know, but the whole situation is very unpleasant. Now, every time I go to see Peter, I'm hurting her without meaning to. The funny thing is that she hardly lets it show. I know I'd be insanely jealous, but Margot just says I shouldn't feel sorry for her. I think it's so awful that you've become the odd one out, I added. I'm used to that, she replied somewhat bitterly. I don't dare tell Peter, maybe later on, but he and I need to discuss so many other things first. Mother gave me a warning tap last night, which I deserved. I mustn't carry my indifference and contempt for her too far. In spite of everything, I should try once again to be friendly and keep my remarks to myself. Even Pim isn't as nice as he used to be. He's been trying not to treat me like a child, but now he's much too cold. We'll just have to see what comes of it. He's warned me that if I don't do my algebra, I won't get any tutoring after the war. I could simply wait and see what happens, but I'd like to start again, provided I get a new book. That's enough for now. I do nothing but gaze at Peter, and am filled to overflowing. Yours, Anne M. Frank. Evidence of Margot's goodness. I received this today, March 20th, 1944. And yesterday when I said I wasn't jealous of you, I wasn't being entirely honest. The situation is this. I'm not jealous of either you or Peter. I'm just sorry I haven't found anyone with whom to share my thoughts and feelings, and are not likely to in the near future. But that's why I wish, from the bottom of my heart, that you will both be able to place your trust in each other. You are already missing out on so much here, things other people take for granted. On the other hand, I'm certain I'd never have gotten as far with Peter, because I think I need to feel very close to a person before I could share my thoughts. I want to have the feeling that he understood me through and through, even if I didn't say much. For this reason, it would have to be someone I felt was intellectually superior to me, and that isn't the case with Peter, but I can imagine you're feeling close to him. So there's no need for you to reproach yourself because you think you're taking something I was entitled to. Nothing could be further from the truth. You and Peter have everything to gain by your friendship. My answer. Dearest Margot, your letter was extremely kind, but I still don't feel completely happy about the situation, and I don't think I ever will. At the moment, Peter and I don't trust each other as much as you seem to think. It's just that when you're standing beside an open window at twilight, you can say more to each other than in bright sunshine. It's also easier to whisper your feelings than to shout them from the rooftops. I think you've begun to feel a kind of sisterly affection for Peter and would like to help him just as much as I would. Perhaps you'll be able to do that someday, though that's not the kind of trust we have in mind. I believe that trust has to come from both sides. I also think that's the reason why Father and I have never really grown so close. But let's not talk about it anymore. If there's anything you still want to discuss, please write, because it's easier for me to say what I mean on paper than face to face. You know how much I admire you, and only hope that some of your goodness and Father's goodness will rub off on me, because, in that sense, you two are a lot alike. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, March 22nd, 1944. Dearest Kitty, I received this letter last night from Margot. Dear Anne, after your letter of yesterday, I have the unpleasant feeling that your conscience bothers you whenever you go to Peter's room to work or talk. There's really no reason for that. In my heart, I know there's someone who deserves my trust as I do his, and I wouldn't be able to tolerate Peter in his place. However, as you wrote, I do think of Peter as a kind of brother, a younger brother. We've been sending our feelers, and a brotherly and sisterly affection may or may not develop at some later date. But it's certainly not reached that stage yet, so there's no need for you to feel sorry for me. Now that you've found companionship, enjoy it as much as you can. In the meantime, things are getting more and more wonderful here. I think, Kitty, that true love may be developing in the annex. All of those jokes about marrying Peter if we stayed here long enough weren't so silly after all. Not that I'm thinking marry him, mind you. I don't even know what he'll be like when he grows up, or if we'll even love each other enough to get married. I'm sure now that Peter loves me too. I just don't know in what way. I can't figure out if he wants only a good friend or if he's attracted to me as a girl or as a sister. When he said I always helped him when his parents were arguing, I was tremendously happy. It was one step towards making me believe in his friendship. I asked him yesterday what he'd do if there were a dozen Annes who kept popping in to see him. His answer was, if they were all like you, it wouldn't be so bad. He He's extremely hospitable, and I think he really likes to see me. Meanwhile, he's been working hard at learning French, even studying in bed until 10:15. Oh, when I think back to Saturday night, to our words, our voices, I feel satisfied with myself for the very first time. And what I mean is, I'd still say the same and wouldn't want to change a thing the way I usually do. He's so handsome. Whether he's smiling or just sitting still, he's so sweet and good and beautiful. I think what surprised him most about me was when he discovered that I'm not at all the superficial, worldly, and I appear to be, but a dreamer, like he is, with just as many troubles. Last night, after the dinner dishes, I waited for him to ask me to stay upstairs, but nothing happened. I went away. He came downstairs to tell Dussel it was time to listen to the radio and hung around the bathroom for a while, but when Dussel took too long, he went back upstairs. He paced up and down his room and went to bed early. The entire evening I was so restless I kept going to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I read a bit, daydreamed some more, looked at the clock, and waited, all the while listening to his footsteps. I went to bed early, exhausted. Tonight I have to take a bath, and tomorrow's so far away. Yours, Anne M. Frank. My answer. Dearest Margot, I think the best thing is simply to wait and see what happens. It can't be much longer before Peter and I will have to decide whether to go back to the way we were or do something else. I don't know how it'll turn out. I can't see any farther than the end of my nose. But I'm certain of one thing. If Peter and I do become friends, I'm going to tell him you're also very fond of him and are prepared to help him if he needs you. You wouldn't want me to, I'm sure, but I don't care. I don't know what Peter thinks of you, but I'll ask him when the time comes. It's certainly nothing bad, on the contrary. You're welcome to join us in the attic or wherever we are. You won't be disturbing us because we have an unspoken agreement to talk only in the evenings when it's dark. Keep your spirits up. I'm doing my best, though. It's not always easy. Your time may come sooner than you think. Yours, Anne.